Welcome to the Arts at ODU Summer Series. I'm Cullen Strawn, Executive Director for the Arts at Old Dominion University. The Summer Series was developed to facilitate community connections through free, accessible programming, to highlight the strength and resilience of the arts at ODU, and to lift spirits during this challenging time. ODU community members, including faculty, staff, students, and alumni, were invited to submit proposals for programs. And this afternoon, we continue the series by featuring Christen Turney. Christen serves as Marketing and Advertising Coordinator here at ODU, and she's a professional calligrapher and co-host of the Calligraphy podcast. She's involved in a worldwide program of calligraphy exchange during the COVID-19 pandemic, and today she offers a presentation entitled Letters from Quarantine. Thank you, Christen.
Thank you so much, Cullen. And I want to say thank you to all of you who are joining and Arts at ODU just for the ability to come here today and share with you something that is so close to my heart, and that is calligraphy. And I'm sure that some of you might know what that means, but then others might think, isn't that something that they used to do a long time ago? Well, I am thrilled to tell you that calligraphy is alive and well today. So what we see here, you might be able to see on my desk screen, is a sample of calligraphy that I wrote for the title of our program. And you've probably seen calligraphy maybe just as you were studying art, things like medieval manuscripts, the Declaration of Independence, even in your history class, but then also even just in our day-to-day, we see calligraphy on restaurant signs, we see handwritten wedding invitations in beautiful scripts. And then actually all these letters behind me are from dear friends of mine who I have met, and some of them I haven't even met, from all over the world. They're all calligraphers. And I just have to say, it is not a lost art. It really, truly is alive and well today. And there's kind of been a calligraphy renaissance that's occurred really the past, I'd say 10 years. It has really picked up and there's been a lot of interest. And so much so that I go to calligraphy conferences every year where I met the co-host of the Calligraphy podcast, Jub. She lives in Texas. And together we do this podcast because we realized there's so many people who really like calligraphy, but there's not really a podcast about it. So in starting that and then kind of navigating the circumstances of these uncertain times, we decided to organize a letter exchange so that some of our listeners would be able to get mail just like this. We had nearly 150 participants from 21 countries participate. And just the interactions we saw on Instagram, people sharing their works in progress, and then also the letters they're getting in the mail. It's an exciting feeling to get something that's not a bill in the mail. And really, this is just the letters are a perk, really, the relationships and just keeping in touch with people as some countries went into lockdown, others, had to get used to some new standards of living. So I'm excited to show you all of those letters, but I think the most important thing before we start is I want to show you some samples of calligraphy. I want to show you what these letters look like. I want to show you how they're written, because then I think once you see how much time it takes to write some of these words and these letters, I think you'll have a better appreciation of the art that I got in my mailbox. And then of course, after I show you those letters, I'm going to demonstrate actually writing an envelope in calligraphy. And I'll show you these samples real quick. We're going to write a letter to ODU's mascot, Big Blue, and we're going to do two versions. We're going to do a version that is in calligraphy and then another version that is using supplies that you probably have at home. I'm sure, especially if you have kids or if you're just kind of an artistic person, you might have markers, you might have colored pencils, crayons, scrapbook paper, just a standard envelope. These are all things that you can use to send something encouraging and just a note of comfort to a loved one or a friend. So let's jump right in. You want to just kind of focus in here on my desk view because I'm going to show you one of my very favorite books. This is the Speedball Textbook. And this book, really, I keep it by my side because it just has a huge wealth of knowledge and styles in here, about 100 years worth of calligraphy styles. And some of these styles actually date back to, centuries, really. So I've highlighted a few that I want to show you in here. We're going to start off There's so much goodness in this book. I can't believe I had to just pick a few pages. I'm sure you've seen something like this. Sometimes it goes by the term Old English, but black letter is what we call it. And I've got a pen here, and you can see this pen tip. It's called a broad edge. When I kind of put it against the paper, you can see it's a flat tip. And that's what we use to get these thick, bold lines. But you can do this style in it. There are so many styles. We call them scripts or hands that you can use. If you are a Lord of the Rings fan, I have a feeling you might like this particular style. This is called Unchal. And believe it or not, it wasn't just a style that somebody said, hey, this would make a great movie title. This has been used for a really long time. But you can see how different this is than the sample that I just showed you. And it just depends on the angle that you hold your pen and just the style of letters. These have such wide oval shapes, almost like little pumpkins. Whereas when we go back to that black letter, you see this O shape now is so compressed, but that's just kind of the style. And so the possibilities with this kind of a nib is really, really incredible. So I'm going to show you how this is actually written a little bit later. I want to flip over to show you. This is my favorite. And this style is what sold me on calligraphy. And it's using what's called a pointed pen nib. This is the broad edge nib. To compare, you can see how flat that is. And this guy looks just like a point. And I'll tell you, when I started learning calligraphy, in the box that this came in for whatever reason, it said this was a ballpoint pen. And I thought to myself, why would anybody spend the time? I'll show you. I've got a pot of ink here. And this is what I dip this pen nib in to achieve these letters. And I thought, if it's a ballpoint pen nib, why wouldn't I just use a ballpoint pen? Well, the secret to this pen is when you apply pressure, am I on screen here? If you can see, this pen opens up. So when I do a stroke that goes upwards, I get a nice thin hairline. But then when I pull down with some pressure, I get this beautiful swell. And once I realized that this is how this tool works, I was really just hooked. And you can do more than letters with these tools. These two pieces here are by master penman Jake Weidman. There is such a thing as a master penman. We can get really nerdy in calligraphy really fast, but he does some incredible artwork that includes painting, that includes drawing, and then also calligraphy. So that's just a very brief, kind of the Cliff Notes version of calligraphy. Again, this Speedball textbook is a phenomenal resource. So if you feel like you want to try and dive in, but you're really not quite sure what style might be best, this book is great. Now, I want to show you how we actually write some of these styles. So I'm going to take just a quick moment. We're going to start with the broad edge pen, and I'm going to open up my ink pot. And I've got this, I'll show you all, this beautiful holder that a friend of mine made for me, and it keeps all my inks. So I have a few different inks in here, but we're going to stick with the black. This is called Sumi ink, and it is made of soot and either some kind of a fat, either animal fat or vegetable fat. You can buy it in a bottle. You can buy it in a stick form and then grind it. But what I'll do, and I'll just show you on screen here, I just dip my nib in the ink, and I like to give it a little shake on a paper towel just to get rid of some excess ink. And it's pretty common to do a quick little test stroke, make sure our ink is flowing here. I'm going to get just a smidge more. So there's a few things about this particular nib. If I hold it flat this way, I'm going to get a nice, thick, juicy line. Now, if I switch this and hold it, I'm going to hold it upright. It might be hard for you to see, but the result is very thin. And most of the broad edge scripts that you see end up kind of being a combination of somewhere in the middle, I should say. So I'm going to use about a 45-degree angle to do an italic A. All right. And sometimes it's a little hard for me to talk when I write, so just bear with me. And there we've got a nice A. And if you've seen I believe it's Apple Chancery font, this kind of a style should look very familiar. I don't know if you can hear the nib scratching, but honestly, it's a very therapeutic sound. Now my letters aren't perfect right now, but I just want you to kind of get the idea for the sake of the illustration. And then I had showed you that black letter style. Let's do something fun here. This is very rigid, but sometimes I like to throw a little curve in here and we get this A. So that's one style. I'm going to show you our uncial style too. And we'll keep on doing our ABCs here. This to me is, I like to call it the Aladdin A, and you'll see why I think in a second. Kind of looks like, oops, we ran out of focus there. Come on, little camera. There we go. So that's our A. Now this is a lot wider than this A or this A, but it all just has to do with the style that you're trying to achieve. And I think for the sake of time, I want to move on to copperplate, but also it really is just my favorite script. So I have a water bowl over here off camera. I like to just wipe my nib down, try and get some of the excess ink off. Now switching over to my favorite. I'm going to dip an ink here. Give it a little shake. And actually, this is a good thing to kind of show you. You might be wondering to yourself, how do you achieve letters like this? Where does the ink go and how is it loaded in? Well, in this nib, you can see this kind of cross shape. And that's actually what holds in ink. And you can write, depending on the size of letter that you're writing, you actually can write a sentence or so or a line or so. Now, what's interesting about this nib is that there's a very specific way it's supposed to work. So you might have noticed that there are really thin lines and then really thick lines. So to get a really thin line is in an upward movement like that. And then I'm going to come around and do my A in an oval shape. And then right around this point, you add a little bit of shade. And this is where the magic happens. So isn't it just, I just love the copperplate. And this is a style that has kind of evolved over time, started over in Europe as roundhand, English roundhand is what it was called. And you actually used a feather quill for that. But then as technology improves, now we use steel nibs, and you might hear the term engrosser script or copperplate. And I know we have some calligraphers in the audience right now. So if you are listening, I know you're like, oh, I know about the debate about what it's called, but really these are all copperplate style letters, so I stick with the term copperplate. But you can see every stroke I go up is going to be a hairline, and then anything downwards is going to be a shade. And actually, this B should have come up a little bit higher, but for the sake of our illustration today, I think you can kind of get the point here. I'll do one more C. And we'll add a little dot. And I just think it's such a lovely, romantic, elegant script. I have a lot of brides who ask for this kind of style. Now, I know that a lot of you may not have access to a random pen holder and a nib, but we have some other tools we can use. Kind of my nib fell out here, so I'm going to stick it back in. And I guess I should mention this kind of comes apart. So depending on the project, I might use a different nib, and it just kind of sticks right in here and you're good to go. But let's move on over to a marker. Now, I'm going to kind of mimic this style that I just did here using, this is just a plain old Crayola marker that I've had in my craft drawer for years. So I'll move the page up so you can see here. Okay. I'm just going to do the same thing. I have got a kind of a light touch when I go upwards, but then when I come down, you can see that difference in shade there. And again, no fancy tools, just a Crayola marker. You can actually do this a little bit with pencil too. If you have a soft pencil, if you use a light touch on your way up and then a thicker touch when you go down, you can kind of get the same result. So that's kind of just the basic way to use these 3 kinds of tools. There are a lot of different tools you could potentially use. And by that, actually, I'll show you, I have one more here. This is kind of a marker style of a broad edge pen, but it's got a reservoir and I can just carry it with me. Sometimes I keep it in my purse and it hasn't been used in a while, so I don't think it's gonna flow very well right now. But these are just just to show you that we have some options here, and pretty much everything I've shown you so far can be purchased online. So it's really not inaccessible to you. But now that we've kind of seen everything, I think it is time for me to show you some of these amazing envelopes that I got. And I want to tell you a little bit about the actual exchange. So here's my first letter I want to show you today. Now I've redacted my address, I think for obvious reasons, but she hand drew this. This letter actually came from Scotland, and she sent me, I asked a few of my people on my list. I guess I'll explain to you how this envelope exchange happened. We at the Calligraphy podcast, community is really, truly at the core of our mission. And I mean, in our slogan, every week I say it, it's a space for calligraphers to talk about, share, and grow in their art while cultivating community along the way. And we had, like I said, almost 150 sign up. We ended up basically assigning everybody to a list of about 8 people. And the goal here was to just practice calligraphy, meet a new friend, and be encouraged by somebody else's art, and then also maybe encourage somebody with a note or a piece of art. And we really saw just such great relationships form through this. And I mean, I've talked to this woman now, every couple of days just on Instagram, just because we happen to be on the same list, and we decided let's follow each other on Instagram. And then I know I have some friends too who are still in, they're locked down, or they're whatever their circumstances are. I know that they're finding such comfort in these letters. So I asked some people on my list to share what they said. And this letter is from Gemma, and you can see it says a touch of Scottish spring. She wrapped this in vellum. And when I pull this out, this is a real flower. And her kids went around their local area. She told me a little bit about what the flower is and all that, but they picked these flowers, they pressed them together. So not only was it an activity for her, it was an activity for her whole family. And I have a quote from her. She says, "The exchange gave me a challenge to rise to with my beginner calligraphy. Some calligrapher friends," that's what we call each other, "I would have never been brave enough to interact with online, and some very beautiful mail to enjoy." And I think that's true too. I think sometimes as artists, we're afraid to put some of our art out there when really these communities can be so open and so kind. And the calligraphy community truly is very welcoming of all skill levels, people from all sorts of different backgrounds. And that's what I love about it. And I love that we were able to connect during a time that's been difficult for people. Now, this card, when you open your mailbox and you see something like this, it's just stunning. This is a bird flourish, all done with this pointed pen nib. And here's another flourish here. This is a feather and a Pablo Picasso quote. Now, I know that we're kind of getting close to the time where we need to start writing, but I have to just show you a few more envelopes. This one is just so beautiful. She's got these beautiful leaves on here, these beautiful flourishes. That's what we call these. And then inside, this heart card, and then, of course, an encouraging note. And she was from Italy. So really, I'm just getting to see art from so many different people. I'll show you one more. This is actually another one from Italy. Just beautiful writing. And you'll notice that a lot of these people are pointed pen people. That's what I call myself. But you do see people doing broad edge and all of that as well. So she did some painting and an Emily Dickinson quote, and she also gave me some tea, which I thought was just so lovely. Added a little bonus in there. So I got some Scottish flowers, and then I got some Italian tea. So real quick, before I start scribing, I want to show you what I sent out. And I mean, if I can toot my own horn for a second, I feel like if this doesn't scream summer, when you open it up, I don't know what does. But I used what's called a speedball nib. It's a bent nib, so it's almost like that broad edge, except it's bent. I used some shimmering blue ink, and then my pointed pen with some white ink. And then when you open it up, you get this surprise of this leafed envelope liner. And I always tell people, it's a letter from Christen Turney if it's a 1/4 inch thick in your mailbox. A wax seal wrapped in vellum, and then a card written in pointed pen. And then also we have some flourishing. And I'm going to try and get the light to catch. There we go. that gold is just, it's one of my favorite golds to use. And all of this is metallic except the white. And then of course I sent her an encouraging note. And I do want to just show you, my cursive is not amazing. My penmanship, I think my print is fine, but my cursive is really nothing to write home about. But just because you may not have good handwriting does not mean you cannot be a calligrapher. So I don't want you to use that as an excuse, because I know that you can do it. This is something that, as you'll see in just a moment, really we just go stroke by stroke with this. So now I'm going to transition over to showing you how I address an envelope. And depending on our time, I might just do part of it today, but I hope that this will at least give you an idea of how long it takes, the time it takes. And at this time too, if you have any questions, there's a Q&A button. I would love to hear your questions. And I know that one of our hosts will read them. So I welcome those. If there's anything that you want to know, I'm happy to answer it for you. So I'll kind of get started writing. And then if our host at any time wants to just kind of interrupt me, feel free.
Hi, Christen. So here's the first question that came in, because we're using Sumi ink. How do you clean Sumi ink from the nibs?
Oh, so I end up, I actually rinse you can't see it. I'll bring it onto screen carefully because I don't want it to spill. You see how dark this water bucket is. And I'll usually just dip my ink in here and then wipe it down with a paper towel. And then you can rinse them under the sink or use a toothbrush too. But it's good to get in the habit of rinsing your nib every so often, because sometimes if you set it down for a second, it might dry on you. But I really haven't had too much trouble getting it off of my nibs, even if it is dried. But that's pretty basic. Just give it a rinse and use a paper towel.
Okay. Well, there was another question that came in. What was the beautiful, that's how it's written, beautiful ink that was used for Heather's envelope?
Oh, so this is a handmade, she makes paint by hand. And her name is, if you look her up on Instagram, I think she's Molly.Marble, something like that. But she makes them herself, and it is beautiful and shimmery, and it works great in your pen nib or with a paintbrush as well. Good eye, because that is a beautiful ink.
It is absolutely gorgeous. Another question is, and there's a couple of these coming in.
Sure.
And, would you recommend, or can you recommend, a good starter kit for calligraphy?
That is a good question. So I can say, and this is not something that is done yet, but through our podcast, that's something that we're working on, because we've noticed that that's a need. And there's a retailer that we team up with called Paper and Ink Arts. So if you go to paperinkarts.com, they actually, I believe, have some starter kits there. Logos Calligraphy, LOGOS. She, I believe, has a starter kit as well, but we're hoping that within the next, really by the fall, we'll have a starter kit available for people that they can get through the podcast, because it is hard to know which tools do I buy, as I'm trying to start, and we want to try and make that easier for all of you. So I hope that helps. And you can also go to another retailer is John Neal Booksellers. They offer some supplies as well.
Okay, great. Another question that's coming in is, what type of pen do you recommend for a beginner?
That is a very good question. And I don't have the example of what not to buy in front of me, but there is definitely something you do not want to buy. And this pen holder here was handmade by, his name is Dan Kunkel. Actually, the woman who makes the handmade paints, this is her husband. They're a dynamic duo. And, this is a little more expensive. You want something that's in maybe the $10 range, but the key is you want something, this is called the flange. This needs to be flexible, and this needs to be bendable, because the way that your nib touches the paper is very important. And there are plastic ones by the Speedball brand, which I do not recommend. There is a brand called Moblique, and I think this is a great starter nib. A starter pen, because it gives you that flexibility without having to break the bank. But that's a very good question because your pen is very important. Anything else you got for me? I'm going to try and get this boulevard out, and then we're going to move on to some tools that you probably have at home. And you can see, I think I told you, it is a slow process. And actually, I'm writing a little faster than I probably normally would, just for the sake of our time today. But once you get into a rhythm, it really is just, I just love setting time aside to write and do something with my hands.
So another really good question that's come in, Christen, is there a website to learn how to do it and practice? And then
Yeah.
is there a course at ODU?
So as far as I know, there is not a course. I would at ODU, I would not mind helping make something like that happen. There are a lot of different teachers online that have classes. If you want to look at people, I always say Instagram is kind of where everybody is in the calligraphy community. So if you want to check out Nina Tran, Ninatran, Nina, I know, does some classes. Logos Calligraphy, who I mentioned before, does. And if I can promote myself, I'm looking to do I haven't announced this yet, so you're all the first to know that I'll be doing an online copper plate class coming up in the fall. So we're just kind of checking out all the, just getting the whole classroom set up and all of that. But that's something that I want to do. And as you can see, if you don't pay attention to what you're writing, you might have a misspelling. So this should be Hampton, but I hope that you all will forgive me on that one. I'm going to switch gears real fast so that I can just show you what you can do with your own supplies. And I hope that you'll take time maybe later on to explore some more calligraphy, even the calligraphy hashtag on Instagram, or if you look up hashtag TCP mail, that's where all of our calligraphers have been posting about the mail that they've received. So let me just show you this. This is a blank envelope. I've put some lines here so I know where I'm going to put my letters. And you can also kind of take it up a notch. This is just a piece of paper that I kind of colored. It's printer paper with some markers. And this works as an envelope liner. You could also use some scrapbook paper. It's a little note that says rain on for our monarchs out there. And that's just kind of a little extra touch that you can add to your letter. But we'll just kind of start writing. Again, this is just with a normal Crayola marker, and you'll see I'm going to write a lot faster here just because it's marker and it's a lot more forgiving. I can move a lot quicker.
Christen, I have a question from Facebook.
All right.
Can you get a left-handed nib holder?
Yes, so that's a good question. Now, lefties, I'm going to just tell you, if you are left-handed, this particular style is a little trickier to learn. And that happens, I think, with everybody. But some calligraphers have a separate, so this is called an oblique holder. And there's left-handed oblique holders where this flange is on the opposite side. I know a lot of left-handers who use this same kind of holder. And then I know some that actually, because this nib comes out, will use a pointed pen nib in a straight holder. And I've noticed more lefties use a straight holder than an oblique holder, but it's total personal preference. And unfortunately, it's something you kind of just have to experiment with and discover for yourself. So that's just all kind of part of the learning journey, I think, if you are a left-handed calligrapher. But I know many, actually, again, Logos Calligraphy, Young Hay, she's a left-handed calligrapher, and she's phenomenal. So it's definitely possible. So I'm going to finish up our address here.
I want to make sure we're getting a couple of questions, Christen.
I know it's 4:30.
Facebook, so it's really good. No, we're going to let you continue because this is really great, and we've got a lot of really great interaction. So another question from Facebook was, how do we get on the list to hear about when you have the copper plate class?
Oh, that's a good question. And something I meant to have set up. But I think the best way to find out announcements from me is through Instagram. So if you follow me over, I'm at the calligrapher Christen, and I'll write it down because my name is a little complicated, not really complicated, but that's probably the best way to find out. I will for sure be announcing there. And that's me there. So I'll for sure be announcing there. And then I'll try and put a link to my mailing list, maybe today or tomorrow, so that you can join, and I'll send that out to my mailing list as well. So I'll leave that up.
I get another request from you. It was, please do a course at ODU. So we'll have to work.
All right.
Kristen.
That would be so fun, because I will say teaching is such a joy to me, to be able to see others learn this, because it's provided just so much joy for me as a just as a person, as a calligrapher, and to see other people enjoy this is just so amazing. And I want to show you real fast. This is just another example of what you can do. Like I said, this is scrapbook paper in our envelope. And if you have scrapbook paper at home, write a nice letter. This is what I wrote out to Big Blue. And you can make a letter to friends be really special. And that's what I really do want you to take away from this. As much as I would love for you all to learn calligraphy too, I really want you to feel like this is something you can do. This is something that you can do to encourage someone and make them feel a little bit more loved, because I would way rather have this come in the mail than another power bill or something like that. So I guess it's probably time to wrap up, Karen.
Yes, we're closing in on our time. I do have one final question for you. This is so beautiful, that this letter that Big Blue is going to receive. When can he expect to receive that in the mail?
Oh, that's a good question. I'll try and send it out this week. I don't know if he'll be there to get it, but I'll see if I can get it into the right hands for sure. That
sounds terrific. This has been an amazing program. The one final question that we have, and this is just a quick question about you, is how long have you been doing calligraphy?
Oh, well, that's very kind of you to ask. I started calligraphy in 2014, and I won't get into the whole nitty gritty of how I got into it, but there's a woman here named Betsy Rivers Kennedy who is actually a left-handed calligrapher, and I learned from her, and she just happened to have all these classes at the time, and I just signed up for every single one of them and really got hooked very fast. But it was back in 2014. And like I said, once I figured out how this guy worked, I was just hooked, and I have really not stopped ever since, and became just so crazy about it that now I've got a podcast and all that. So that's, I think, another last plug for you is if you're interested, we're in our second season, but one of the first episodes we did is what is calligraphy? And I think that's a good one for somebody who's maybe trying to understand what is calligraphy, what options are out there. I think that's a good place for you to start too. But I'd love to connect with you, especially over on Instagram, and you'll be able to hopefully learn a little bit more.
I think that's it. Unfortunately, we couldn't get into all of the questions. And so I do invite everybody to go to Instagram and connect with Christen directly and ask any questions that we weren't able to answer and ask today during our program. So thank you, Christen. And now we'll go back to Cullen.
I invite you to join us over the next few weeks as we continue presenting visual, literary, and performing arts during the remainder of the summer series. To learn more about the series and register for events, please visit oduartstix.com. That's oduartstix.com. And follow ODU Arts on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for updates. Thank you for joining us.